So today we're talking about transporter machines, magic tricks, Nazi war criminals, and dementia. That is, we're talking about some puzzles for the philosophy of personal identity. So what I want to start with is talking about two interesting cases. The one is the case of a transporter machine. So in this case, it's a sci-fi case. It's a case in which a space cadet, call them, is transported from one place to another via some machine in the spaceship. Okay, how does that work? Well, they walk into this machine, they say, "Beam me up, Scotty," or whatever, and then they're transported to an alien planet dozens, maybe hundreds of miles away, instantaneously. Okay, how does it work, though? Well, let's say that in this case, it works by the person in the machine being copied by some scanning device, and at the same instant that that person is recreated with other atoms, atom for atom, on the other planet, hundreds of miles away, say, the original copy is destroyed in the machine. Okay, so that's what's represented with these two lines here, that as this person goes out of existence, at the same exact time, this one comes into existence in a different location, hundreds of miles away. So, you might not see any problem with this. But what we can start to see a problem when we look at a very similar but different case. This case is taken from the movie called The Prestige. So in this case, a magician performs a magic trick called the Transported Man or something like that, where he seems to be transported instantaneously across a huge distance. But what's actually happening is he's had a scientist design a machine for him that does essentially the same thing, scans him, copies him, and at the same instant that it scans, he comes into existence at another place. The difference in these two cases is that how the trick works, kind of darkly, is that this original is not destroyed by the scanning machine. The magician creates a system where once the original is scanned, he drops into a water tank underneath the stage where the audience can't see him and is drowned. So instead of the original going out of existence at the exact same moment as the new version is created, you actually have a small overlap of, maybe call it 2 minutes, however long it takes a person to drown. So there's an overlap of the two people. For about 2 minutes, two people are in existence that are exactly alike. So as we said, both of these machines make an atom for atom copy, and what that means is not only are their bodies exactly alike in all of their properties, but even their mental states. In fact, when the person is the duplicate is originally created, he'll actually have the exact same mental states that the person going into the machine had. He might even have residual fear about walking into the machine before he realizes that he's made it out. Okay, so what's problematic about these two cases? Well, in the first case, it was pretty easy to see the person who shows up on the alien planet as being the same person as the person who walked into the transporter machine. Because at any given time, there's only one person. And after all, he's exactly like this person who walks into the machine. But in the second case, we actually see that this person can't be the same person as the person who walked into the machine because they both exist in different places for about 2 minutes. So during this time right here, who is the person who walked into the machine? Well, it's the person who's down in the tank. A different way to ask that question is, if you're walking into the machine, do you expect to fall into a tank after the machine turns on, or do you expect to be looking at the stage from hundreds of feet away where you're transported to? Well, the answer is you should walk into the machine afraid because you should expect to drop into that tank. So what that means is this person who comes out of the machine is a different person from the person who walked into the machine. But in this case, it initially looked like the person who comes out of the machine is the same person who went into the machine. But surely it can't, whether this person, the duplicate, is the same person as the one who entered the machine, can't depend on whether there's an overlap in their existence. In other words, imagine that in the transporter case, the original case, the sci-fi case, that the machine broke. And so while it was able to scan and duplicate, it was actually unable to perform its destroying function. And so this person went on existing for a little bit longer. Essentially, that's what this case is. It's showing us what would happen if the machine broke, or it took the machine 2 minutes to destroy the original. And in that case, it seems like when you walk into the transporter, or the duplicator, what it really is, you should expect to be destroyed 2 minutes later. Now, what that means, really interestingly, for personal identity, for identity across time, is that being exactly the same is not enough to be the same person. This person is exactly the same as the one who walked in the machine, but it's not the same person. The original person is destroyed. Similarly, this person is exactly the same, atom for atom, thought for thought, desire for desire, as the one who walked in the machine, but they're not the same person. And you can see that because of this overlap. If they were the same person, they couldn't have been in two different locations at the same time. Okay, so what that means is being qualitatively identical is not sufficient for being numerically identical. So having all the same qualities is not sufficient for being the same person. So you might think maybe qualitative identity has nothing to do with numerical identity, but it's not that easy either, right? We have lots of cases where people change really rapidly in terms of their mental states, their bodily states, and we tend to think of them as being very different people, or maybe as being numerically distinct people. Imagine we were able to develop the technology, for example, to do a brain transplant. So someone goes to sleep one night, on Monday night, they wake up Tuesday morning with a different brain, and they wake up not knowing any of the people they knew Monday night, or the person who went to sleep knew Monday night, not having any of the desires or loves or affections that that person had. They don't have any of the skills that person had. In fact, they have a whole different set of skills and knowledge of people, knowledge of facts, and affections and desires. So all of their psychology has changed very rapidly overnight with the implementation of this brain transplant. We want to say, seems like the person who woke up Tuesday morning is actually a different person from the person who went to sleep Monday night. They're not the same person. They're numerically distinct. So we want to say that because there's a really big qualitative difference between them. They have lots of different qualities, mostly in terms of their mental makeup. So the first two cases showed us that being qualitatively identical is not the same, or does not entail that you're numerically identical. But the second kind of case shows us that being similar in terms of your quality is somehow important for being the same person over time. If you rapidly change all of your mental states, or a lot, and even maybe your physical states and properties, then you're not the same person. That's what that case, the brain transplant case, showed us. Okay, so why does all of this matter? Well, first we just saw that there's a really messy relationship between qualitative identity and numerical identity. They're relevant to each other, but it's not a real clean connection. Consider, to give it a concrete gloss, the case of the Nazi war criminal who's tried in his 90s for crimes that he committed when he was 17. This happened recently. So there, it doesn't make sense that we're prosecuting this person if it's not the same person who committed the crimes. We seem to be assuming, and it seems obvious, that this 90-something-year-old guy, as long as we have proof that it is the same person, we're fine saying that this is the same person that committed the crimes however many years ago. And yet, it's actually, there's no difference in terms of the difference between the 90-something-year-old guy and the 17-year-old, that case, and the case of the brain transplant case. The only difference is it happens over a longer period of time. The 90-something-year-old guy could be just as different from the 17-year-old who committed the crimes as the Tuesday morning brain transplant person is from the Monday night person. It just happened over a longer period of time and more gradually. And yet, in the brain transplant case, we want to say these are two different people. In the Nazi war criminal case, we want to say that they're the same person, even though the difference between the two is just as big of a gap. Finally, consider an in-between case, a case where the change doesn't happen immediately, but it also doesn't happen over the course of 80, 75, or 80 years. And these are cases of dementia patients, where they're rapidly changing personalities, but not quite so rapidly as overnight. And this is an in-between case, right? It could happen over the course of months or years usually, where they lose a lot of memories, their personalities change a lot of times. They don't even know the people who were closest to them before. So in these cases, we're genuinely unsure sometimes, and this is how we find ourselves at least, whether this is the same person as the person who existed pre-dementia. So what does all this tell us? Well, what I'm trying to show is just that there's lots of puzzles around personal identity, right? There's clearly some connection between having similar or the same qualities across time and being the same person, but it's not a real clear-cut connection, right? Even being identical in your qualities is not enough to be the same person across time. And this should motivate us to come up with a more nuanced theory of personal identity.